Hi everyone, and welcome back to our Tuesday Talks. We are so excited to be back with HEB and Pooja this week to go over dinner. This is our last in the 3 series for the month, and next week we will be going over a Q&A. So please feel free to submit any questions that you might have for Pooja or the HEB team. She would love to answer them. I will write in the comments how to ask those questions outside of Facebook, or if you'd like to send them through Facebook, feel free to do so. Without further ado, I'll pass it over.
Awesome, great. Thank you so much for that. So like she said, we're going to go into our meal solutions, and today, like in our 3 series segment, we're going to wrap up with a discussion on dinner. But just before we get into that, I hope everybody had a good Labor Day weekend, stayed safe, stayed healthy, just caught up on some much needed relaxing time. And if you're just joining us for the first time, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on myself and kind of how I got to this place right now. So like she said, I'm a registered dietitian with HEB. And so what that means is I did a little bit of education in nutrition. So I spent 6 years in school getting a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, really learning all things that are nutrition. But that being said, nutrition is a science that's constantly changing. So there's always new things to learn, new education out there to really get a good grasp on what's happening in this space. And then before I ended up working at HEB, so HEB being the grocery store, before I ended up working at the grocery store, I started my position in a clinical setting. So I started off working in an outpatient center, and then I moved to a hospital. And that's more of traditionally where you would find a dietitian. It's really new that we're actually operating in the grocery store space. And so traditionally, dietitians work in hospital settings, and we're working with a variety of people. So whether they are in the ICU, or they're coming in for some diabetes complications, or they're coming in for surgery, nutrition is super important throughout all of these different aspects. But what I was seeing primarily, I was actually working at a stroke center in Houston. And what I was learning is that a lot of these people that were coming in, a lot of these conditions could have been prevented. So the progression of their diabetes, or the progression of the heart disease, or their high blood pressure, a lot of that is so prevented, but it was hard to do that in the hospital setting. And so I learned pretty quickly after that, that if you work in a grocery store, you actually have the opportunity to meet with people and provide that education, talk about reading labels, you could talk about all the words on these packages, and you can do a lot of that preventive care. So that's why it does make a lot of sense for dietitians to be in the grocery store setting. And I think more and more we'll start to see a lot more dietitians in this space. And if you aren't familiar with HEB, I'll just give you a little bit of background on who we are. So HEB is a Texas-based grocery company. It's been family owned and operated since 1905, and it's still currently owned and operated by that original family. We have about 340 and more stores within Texas and Mexico. And if you're familiar, or if you're not familiar, HEB is very, very community oriented. So you'll see a lot of one of the main values of our company is really just giving back to the community. So you'll see a lot of things in the school system, or around public education, or just really giving back, even in times of disaster, so after hurricanes and natural disasters hit our communities, HEB is right out there really helping put that community back together. And more specifically, what is HEB Nutrition Services? So basically, across Texas, we've got a team of registered dietitians who primarily do these individual consults. So what that means is you're booking a consult, you have a 1-hour appointment with a registered dietitian where you can talk about all things related to your medical history, medications you're on, any goals that you have. So you can talk about this with your registered dietitian and then actually set up goals. It's really interesting because this is actually a service that your insurance might already be covering. So if you're interested, we can talk about how you might look into that to book an appointment. Outside of these one-on-one consults, we also do things like a grocery shopping tour. So physically, you can grab a shopping cart and our dietitians will go shopping with you and teach you about all the different aisles, what are some really fun products to try. If you're having a hard time meeting a certain nutrient, then you can talk about, this is a great way, this is a really good source of fiber or a certain vitamin. Maybe if you're low in vitamin D, our dietitian can take you all around the store and show you really great products to help you boost that vitamin D. And then we also do things like a lunch and learn, which is coming on site, and then something like metabolic testing, which is a 10 to 15-minute breath test that we can run to see how many calories your body is burning, how many calories should you eat. That test right now, because of COVID and the nature of that test, and it requires you to be pretty close together in a room, we're actually not doing that test right now, but hopefully soon enough, we'll be able to pick that back up. So going into our topic today, so really when we're thinking about how you want to set up your dinner plate, same thing goes. So we're talking about your plate for breakfast, your plate for lunch, if you're including a snack, you still want to have the same sort of layout. And so what that means is having half of that plate be fruits and vegetables. So remember, lots of different colors, textures, flavors are going to come from your fruits and vegetables. You want a quarter of your plate to be lean protein. So remember, if you're not familiar with how to put this on your plate, a quarter of your plate should also be about the size of your palm. So it's a good way to kind of assess that if you're eating in a different size plate or if your protein looks a little bit different. And then lastly, you also want to include a quarter of your plate to be grains. And so again, if we don't have measuring cups or if your plate looks a little bit different, about the right portion size for you is going to be about the size of your fist. And using your hands is a really great tool because all of us require a different amount of calories. We all require different amounts of food, but your hands are definitely correlated to the amount of food that you would want to have. So when you're thinking about, again, your grains, you want that to be about a fist. You want your lean protein to be about the size of your palm, and your fruits and vegetables. So if you put two of your hands together, that's approximately the amount of fruit and vegetable you would want to have at any given meal. And remember, this is all very, very flexible. So if you feel like, breakfast really isn't your place to get all these fruits and vegetables, you can definitely make up for it later in the day, maybe include some snacks to kind of make up for this. Or if your dinner tends to be fruit and veggie heavy, then that's absolutely a good way to kind of balance that out. And then thinking about some dinner hacks. So I had a really fun time putting these ideas together because it just gets me really excited to make nutrition really easy for people to understand and just make it part of your daily life. So we're going to talk through some of these hacks. So first one that I really, really love to do is either using a crock pot or something like an Instant Pot to really help pull this meal together. Those are really great. If you're not familiar with an Instant Pot, it's just a kind of a fancy version of a crock pot where you can do a lot more in that. Literally these one pot things are just so easy where you can set it up in the morning, just put all of your ingredients in there, and then it's just going to cook and go all day long. So it's a very hands-off approach to putting a dinner together. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to make all these dishes dirty. So we can talk a little bit more about that in just a second. Also using things like one pot dishes. So again, really trying to cut down on the amount of cookware we're pulling out and how much we're putting on the stove and just getting all of these dishes dirty, because again, the dinner might be great, but then there's all this cleanup and work that has to go after that. So we'll talk a little bit about some easy one pot dishes where you're really just using one pot. Also relying on things like pre-cut vegetables. So if you go to the produce section of your HEB, you'll see along the wall, there's a lot of different pre-cut veggies that just really shave down the amount of time and effort that goes into putting this dinner together. So for example, if you're cooking things that need some celery or they need some onion, you could totally get some pre-cut celery and onion, and it's just gonna really cut down on the amount of time that you're putting into this meal. Because if you think about an onion, it's about cutting it, you've got to peel it, then you got to chop it and dice it and do all of that to get it into the right space. Or you can cut down maybe about 5-10 minutes or so and just go ahead and get something that's already done. And even relying on any other vegetables that are already pre-washed or pre-prepared. Something I love getting pre-cut and pre-prepared is a butternut squash. I don't know if you've experienced that before, but I really tried to see like what is the difference between getting one that's prepared and ready and just ready to go versus getting the actual squash and doing all of that work. And I'll tell you, to get that squash and to peel it and to cut it and to clean it and to dice it up and then get it ready to roast, literally added like 15 minutes to this dinner prep time. Or I could just get the bag that's already diced butternut squash, and you can literally just take that whole bag, dump it out into a little tray, and then roast it right away. So it cuts down time significantly. Also, when you're thinking about specific dinner recipes that you want to do, really think about finding recipes that have less than 5 ingredients. Studies, research, all of this good information suggests that we do better when there's less ingredients, because again, the more ingredients involved, the more knives we're getting dirty, the more cutting boards, the more dishes, the more prep work, more ingredients, more cost, everything goes into that. So really try to think about less than 5 ingredients. Also keeping the pantry and keeping the freezer stocked. So what that means is try to keep your pantry stocked with things like some good grains. So whether it's a whole grain pasta or rice or some canned veggies, that's an easy way to keep things preserved and then pull it together when you need to make a dinner at home pretty quickly. And then also keeping your freezer stocked too. So keeping things like bagged frozen vegetables, any bagged proteins. We even have things like steamable packages of rice. So it's already cooked, and you can actually just take that package from the freezer, put it in the microwave, and it's gonna steam that rice and make it easy and ready to go in less than 4 minutes. So that's a really easy way to just keep things on hand. So when you're in a pinch and you just don't know what to put together for dinner, if we have a lot of these things on hand, we can start to see that meal come together a lot quicker. And then lastly, my favorite is when you're just completely out of ideas and you just don't know what to do for dinner one day, doing breakfast for dinner is always a really good save. So talking specifically about these one dish dinners, so if you go to our website, which is highlighted at the bottom, heb.com/recipes, you'll see on that homepage of recipes, what's also highlighted here are one dish dinners. So you'll find a huge variety of lots of different types of recipes of literally everything that can be cooked in one dish. So thinking along the lines of soup, chili, pastas, stir fries, casseroles, all of these things can be put together in one dish, and that can really simplify your dinner making. And especially thinking about things like soups and chilies, may not be the best idea right now since it's still, pretty warm outside, but soon as things actually feel a little bit more like fall and when the second half of the year actually cools down a little bit, a lot of those soups and chilies are going to work out really well for us. And then also thinking about how things like soups and chilies either work out really well as leftovers, like how we talked about last week. You can really use those dinners as leftovers for lunch. Or you could even freeze them and then just pull it out later when you really don't feel like making dinner or there's no time for dinner. That's a great idea where you can just pull that back out of the freezer and now you have dinner without any prep at all. Another great idea for putting together a dinner is also using a snack platter. So by no means do you have to have a certain dinner that looks a certain way with a protein and a vegetable and a starch. That's great if you want it to look like that, but it absolutely doesn't have to. Really what we want you to have is just a complete balanced plate. And so that could be something with a fruit, a vegetable, some protein, and some grains. So that could very well be a snack platter. It doesn't have to be this fully cooked, spent so much time in the kitchen. Our goal as dietitians is really just to make sure that you have the good nutrients on your plate, and then what goes in your plate is going into your body. And the reality is that there are a lot of obstacles that get these foods onto your plate, then it's not going to happen. So if we think about putting together a little snack platter, including any kind of fruit you want to have, we would encourage just try to find things that have a lot of different colors. And the reason I stress a lot of different colors is because all of your different colored fruits and vegetables are going to have different types of nutrients in them. So for example, things that are orange, like carrots and sweet potato, they're going to have a particular nutrient, beta carotene and vitamin A, versus things that are purple, like a cabbage or an eggplant and even plums, they have a different category of nutrients, like antioxidants. So you want to get a good variety of colors because that'll indicate that you're getting a really good variety of nutrients. So you think about your fruits, again, any kind of fruit. I would recommend something that you like, something that's also, again, not a lot of work. If it takes a lot of work, again, it's just going to make it a little bit harder to get it on the plate in the first place. When I personally put together these snack platters for dinner, because I definitely do that for dinner many nights, I'm putting together things like berries, because again, they don't require any work. I'm getting something like blackberries or blueberries or even grapes where I can literally just wash them and put it on the snack platter, versus something like a mango or a cantaloupe or a watermelon. all very nutritious and very, very tasty. They just require a lot more work on my end. So I try to keep things a little bit simpler on these nights. Regarding your vegetables, again, any vegetable can go well on a snack platter, including things like celery or things like carrots, or if you are a fan of snap peas, those are all really great options. And again, thinking about getting different colors on this platter. So again, thinking about your greens, your oranges, your reds. Bell peppers are a really fun way to include a lot of different colors on this snack platter. So whether you want to get the big bell peppers and slice that up, or if you want to get those little mini sweet peppers, those are a really great way, again, adding in lots of color, adding a little bit of sweetness too. And then you're getting your vegetable intake for that meal too. Thinking about your proteins, this can come in a lot of different forms too. So specifically, if you wanted to add in some meats, that's totally fine. Just be sure that we're trying to opt for a variety that has a little bit lower on the sodium intake. So really trying to make sure we're controlling that, really looking at that saturated fat also. But protein, again, can come in a lot of different forms too. So if you wanted to include a little bit more of the plant-based proteins, you could include things like nuts on this platter. You could even include something like a hummus, which is a dip that's made out of chickpeas that's going to have some protein as well. Or you could even include it from some dairy. So as you see in this platter, there are different varieties of meats on here, but you also have some different cheeses that are also going to contribute to this protein intake. You could even, if we're going a little bit further with this, you could even take a plain Greek yogurt, make it into a fun dip, and then use that for your vegetables too. So if you wanted to dip in your carrots or your snap peas or your celery, making Greek yogurt dip is a really good way to do that. And there's lots of different ways for you to make a Greek yogurt dip. Again, I would encourage you to choose the flavors that you enjoy. But you would start with a just plain Greek yogurt. That's going to give you approximately, depending on which brand, you'll get about 15 to 25 grams of protein from a Greek yogurt. So very, very excellent amount. And then just add in whatever kind of spices you want in that to make it a good flavorful dip. So if you wanted to add in some garlic or some pepper, or if you like, I personally really like those Hidden Valley Ranch packets. Traditionally, you would take that packet and then mix it in with some sour cream and some mayonnaise. But if we're erring on the side of trying to be a little bit better for you and trying to really watch some of those high saturated fat intakes, you could swap it out for a Greek yogurt and it would be a same 1-to-1 ratio. So I really like adding that. And then lastly, thinking about your grains. So that's a really easy thing to put on our plates. Thinking easily, we could add in something like a whole grain cracker onto this platter, or if you like something like pita chips, that would be a great thing to add in. Depending on how you put together your board, there's a lot of different ways you could go with your grains. You could even make a small little pasta salad, or if you had some leftover pasta salad from a previous meal, that's an easy way to just add this onto this platter and then make that portion a little bit easier. And then next, we're going to go into our recipes for today. So remember, we're thinking along the lines of really making sure that these meals are easy to put together and that they can really be cooked together in a one-pot type of meal. So this option that we have here is a grilled chicken breast with a vegetable medley. So you see your ingredients here, and just thinking about what we just talked about, getting all those different colors. So you'll see here you have your fresh green bell peppers, your yellow squash, your zucchini, your asparagus, so lots of different colors there. And depending on which vegetables you have on hand, what's in your freezer, what do you need to finish up quickly before it goes bad. Remember, these recipes are just a guideline. You're more than welcome to split this up, do it however you want, just really swap it out for any other vegetables you prefer. And again, your protein, in this case, we're putting in 3 ounces of chicken, but again, if you have any other proteins that you prefer to use, by all means, feel free to swap that out. And then lastly, we threw in a 1/2 cup of Central Market Orzo. So that's something that's similar to a pasta. So if we're thinking about this meal, we've got our grains coming out of the Orzo. We have the chicken supplying the protein, and then everything else literally is giving us all of those vegetables. So when we're thinking about what we just talked about regarding portion sizes, so that 1/2 cup of the Orzo is approximately the size of your fist. I know everybody's a little bit different, but in this picture, you can see that it's about the size of someone's fist. The chicken is all spread out, but that would be approximately the size of your palm. And then all of those vegetables put together, pretty much between all those vegetables, there's about 2 cups of vegetables there, which is also about the size of, if you put 2 of your hands together, what fits in there, that's going to be about 2 cups of vegetables. Another option that we've got to discuss is a shrimp pasta salad. So you already know where we're going with this. So we're thinking about the protein is coming out of your shrimp. Shrimp is a really easy one that, again, you can get the huge bag of that. It can stay in your freezer, and it's something that you can just pull out as needed. Your pasta here is going to count as your grains. You can use 100% whole wheat, which again is going to give you a little bit of extra fiber. It's also going to give you protein. And then in this case, in some vegetables with your celery, with your cucumbers. And again, there are recommendations, use a 1/2 cup of celery, use a cup of cucumbers. But again, pasta salad is something that is super, super flexible. So really you can customize it however you want. Add in whichever colors, add in whatever flavors you want. And then in this case, we're also adding a couple tablespoons of olives just to add in a little bit of saltiness, also adding in some fats to just balance out this whole meal. Pasta salad is one of my favorites because it's something that you can make in a big batch, and then it's going to last for a couple more meals. We're also thinking about tacos. Tacos are on our mind like all the time. So when you're thinking about how to put together some tacos for dinner, so again, you've got your 3 ounces of chicken. That's just in this recipe. Literally, if you have any other proteins you want to use, feel free to swap that out. We're also adding in a 1/4 cup of mango pico de gallo. So regular pico is going to have your tomatoes, onions, cilantro, jalapenos. This one's including some mango. So again, adding in that tropical flavor, but it's also going to add in some sweetness too. Adding in 2 tablespoons of the pepper toppers. If you're not familiar with pepper toppers, it's essentially like a sauce that you can add into a lot of different things, whether it's adding it onto tacos or mixing it into a dip, or using it as a spread like on tortillas, or if you're making a sandwich or a burger, you can just kind of spread it onto that. And then we're also including in this meal 2 of the mixla tortillas. Familiar with mixla tortillas, that is a hybrid tortilla between corn and flour, hence the name mixla. But that's going to be a good option just if you're not all the way on the corn end, if you don't want to totally do a lot of the flour either, just because the carbs are usually a little bit higher in the flour tortillas, you can opt for a mixla, which is right there in the middle. It has the consistency closer to a flour tortilla, but it's going to have those good corn tortilla attributes too. Our next recipe here is a turkey chili. So again, maybe not great right now because it's still a little bit warm, but soon enough, it's going to taste really nice and warm and savory when the weather gets a little bit cooler. But again, turkey chili, whatever kind of chili you want to use, is a really great option to, again, put it in that crock pot, stick it in an Instant Pot, just dump everything in there. And it's a super easy dinner that you can put together. Make it in a big batch, freeze what's left over, have leftovers for lunch, maybe share them with a friend. But it's a really great meal that doesn't require a lot of dish work. And when you're thinking about all the ingredients that go into this, so again, we're thinking about the variety of colors and the variety of nutrients here. So your 3 ounces of your turkey is going to supply that really good lean protein here. And then you've got your 1/2 cup of your red bell pepper. So again, we're getting the red, we're getting the white onion, you're getting the yellow corn, you've got your orange carrots in here. And we've got some other ingredients too, like the diced tomatoes that come in the can. Perfectly fine to use because in this case, we're recommending the no salt added one. So you're not going to get that ridiculous amount of sodium that you would typically get in a more traditional can. And then we're also adding in some broth. You're adding in some canned beans, again, doing that low sodium option, getting your greens out of your fresh celery. And then lastly, topping it with some avocados for some good healthy fats, some creamy texture, and then again, boosting it with some additional fiber as well. And then we've got a casserole. So remember, we talked about casseroles being a really good option for a one-pot dish. Literally, we can put all of this together in one tray and make this meal a lot easier. So again, we're thinking about using that lean ground beef. Again, when we talked about beef last time, perfectly acceptable to use as long as we're using an option that's greater than 90% lean, just to really make sure that we're putting in something that's not super high in saturated fat. So remember, if you're getting ground beef, really try to make sure that it's a greater than 90% lean. And that actually goes for any kind of ground meat option you're getting, whether it's beef or it's turkey. Always shoot for greater than 90%. And then the other ingredients that we're adding into this are going to be your white onions. So again, we're getting that great nutrient from the white onion. You're adding in some pinto beans, you're adding in green chilies. We're using the yellow corn tortillas, but again, these are all just suggestions. So if you prefer to use flour tortillas, or if you prefer to use the mixed-loaf tortillas, which is that blend between corn and flour, feel free to swap that out. Also using an enchilada sauce, we're throwing in some cheese. And then again, we're actually making some of this with the plain Greek yogurt just to cream it up, and then also add in some really good protein into this meal as well. And then just to go ahead and wrap up our discussion today. So remember, as we talked about in every other segment that we've done, really making sure that we follow these 3 methods in order to see a good, successful meal come together. So remember, thinking about keeping it simple. So make sure that we're trying to keep these recipes or trying to keep the meals to about 5 ingredients or less. If you feel comfortable getting into recipes and different meals that include more than 5 ingredients, by all means, go for it. But if this is something where we're just kind of starting out with making dinner, or if you're just not sure if this is going to work out super well, and if you're looking for new recipes, then consider looking for something that has about 5 ingredients or less. Also think about making a plan. So when we're thinking about dinner, that comes in a lot of different ways. So again, think about the actual plan for the week. Do you have any evening commitments? Do you have anything going on that might interfere with dinner? Also think about if you're typically exercising or getting a little bit more active, because that's when the evenings cool down a little bit. Think about how we build that into the evening routine also if you're trying to start making dinner at home. A lot of times for a lot of people, it's easier to make dinner, eat dinner first, and then go for a walk in the evening, just because it helps out with a little bit more of blood sugar regulation. A lot of times walking after eating a meal can help to bring down that blood sugar a little bit easier. And it's also just a little bit easier on the digestion. If you're dealing with any reflux issues, that's also a really good time to go out for a walk also, because the last thing you want to do is eat a meal and then sit down, or eat a meal and lay down. That's kind of the worst thing to do if you have some reflux. So if you have that issue, thinking about eating dinner, going for a walk, that would be a really great way to help manage a lot of those conditions. And then also think about with your plan, seeing what you have in stock in your own pantry, in your freezer, just kind of getting creative with some of those meals and thinking about what can I put together with what I already have. And if you're kind of stuck, if you're like, I don't really know how any of these foods might go together, feel free to book an appointment with us, and we can give you a really good idea of, hey, maybe this is a meal using this in your freezer, this in your pantry, this in your fridge. We can put this together. We can definitely help out with what you already have on hand. And then lastly, all of our dietitians always want you to eat what you love, and definitely make sure that you love what you're eating. Because again, if you're forcing yourself to get into something that you just don't like, but you're doing it for the nutrition benefits, you're not going to be a happy person. You're causing yourself a little bit more stress actually to get through that meal. And ultimately, eating should be a fun experience. It should be positive. So we want you to enjoy what you're eating. So again, think about the foods that you already love and how can we build this into healthy, sustainable meals. And again, if you need some help with that, if you're like, I love this casserole that I make, but I know it's not great for me because this is what I put in it, bring that recipe to us and we can talk about like, hey, maybe swap this ingredient out. Here's a better item here. Here's something else that we could use. And it's still sort of the same meal with a healthier twist on it. And then lastly, just wanted to let you guys know, so in a couple weeks, we will be doing a live question and answer with our registered dietitians. So like she was saying earlier, feel free to submit your questions so that we can get all of these things addressed as we go into fall and go into the later half of the year. Specifically thinking about, if you have any questions going into the holidays or what's to come with the last couple months of the year, we can definitely help out with all of those questions that you have.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think at the beginning I mentioned the Q&A was next week, but we actually have a week in between, so extra time for you to get your questions in. Feel free to comment in the comment section on Facebook your questions. You can also ask your sales team member that you've been communicating with, and they'll pass it along, or you can email me directly. And we just appreciate you so much. Thank you for being here, and we will see you on the 22nd.